What's up guys, Manny from Motomillion, and this is your brake upgrade guide for the Panigale V2 and the Streetfighter V2. This guide will cover the models that I mentioned, but it will also cover the submodels of the Panigale V2 and the Streetfighter V2 because the braking components of these bikes are exactly the same. Unfortunately, the braking system leaves a lot to be desired with these brakes, and luckily there is some great upgrades that you could do to your braking system so that you achieve what you would expect from a sport bike in terms of braking. Let's break down the components of the braking system and the upgrades that are available for it. Let's start off with the calipers. The front calipers are pretty much the weakest point when it comes to the braking system of these bikes. These bikes come with the Brembo M4.32 calipers, which are pretty archaic by today's standards. They were released in 2007 on the 1098 Superbike. The braking components and the available technology has come a long way now, and Brembo offers some great upgrades for these motorcycles. The Stylemma calipers by Brembo being the most obvious choice of upgrade because of the price range of these calipers, and also they work directly with the stock master cylinder and the stock brake lines. The Stylemma calipers offer better performance in terms of their lightweight design. They are the stiffest cast calipers that Brembo has ever made, and as I mentioned, the price point makes them very affordable and almost must-do upgrade on your Panigale V2 or Streetfighter V2. In terms of looks, they're offered in silver, black, or red to suit any taste. One thing to note is when you upgrade to the Stylemma calipers on these bikes, you must use the Panigale V4 specification shorter caliper bolts. These are easily available, and you might want to look into titanium caliper bolt options. And if you're not on a budget and you're going all out, the GP4MS calipers that Brembo offers are the best road calipers available. And if budget is not an issue, the GP4MS calipers are the highest end calipers that you can get from Brembo. They directly bolt on, with the exception of the caliper bolts. Just like the Stylemma, you'd have to run the Panigale V4 specification shorter front bolts for it. But these calipers will be able to take whatever you throw at them, be it on the road or the track. They're basically the top of the line, and just like the Stylemma calipers, they work directly with your stock master cylinder, and they're a direct bolt-on in terms of your brake lines. There are some other calipers on the Brembo lineup like the GP4RX calipers. These are not really direct bolt-on because you will need brake lines to fit these on your motorcycle, and with the availability of the Stylemma calipers and the GP4RX wouldn't be really advised on this motorcycle because you will not be able to run your stock master cylinder nor your stock brake lines. Now that we talked about our front calipers, let's talk about the rear calipers. These bikes come with great cast monoblock rear calipers by Brembo. If you want to upgrade it to match the look of your front calipers in terms of the GP4MS with the nickel plating, or with the Stylemma, if you're going with the black or the red Stylemmas, you could run the P234 rear caliper, which is available in nickel plated finish, or the black finish that's available. But I want to note that this would probably be purely an aesthetic upgrade. Even though the rear caliper will be lighter and also a better performing caliper, it would be hard pressed for any rider to notice any performance difference with these calipers. But there's no shame in upgrading something like your calipers just for the looks of it, especially in this case, your rear calipers to match your front calipers. Now let's talk about your rotors, and let's start off with the front rotors. In terms of the front rotors, your bike comes with semi-floating rotors, which is pretty much standard on all sport bikes. You could upgrade to the Brembo Super Sport or the Brembo T-Drive fully floating rotors. These rotors both offer the benefits of a fully floating rotor. They're going to have better thermal expansion capabilities, which means that even under extreme circumstances, there's going to be less of a brake drag. But other than just the less brake drag, they offer better performance abilities, that they're going to have more thermal capacity because those rotors both are thicker, but also the rotor material is a different composition from the stock ones that come on the motorcycle, meaning that you're going to feel a better brake bite when you go and pull your brake lever. The Super Sports come with the traditional round bobbins, and the T-Drives come with the proprietary T-Drive system that Brembo has engineered, meaning that the T-Drives will perform better under extreme heat expansion. I also want to point out the Super Sports have a gold carrier and the T-drives are only available in the black carrier. So this is also something to consider if you're trying to achieve a certain look with your motorcycle. And since we're talking about the front rotors, I think it's a good time to think about oversizing your front rotors, because thankfully the Panigale V4 spec 330mm front rotors fit on these motorcycles. All you got to do is take your caliper spacers that are on top of your caliper and put them in between your fork leg and your caliper, which then achieves for you to be able to run the oversized 330mm rotors as opposed to the 320mm rotors that's found on these motorcycles from the OEM specs. And this gives you the benefit of having even more thermal capacity because those rotors are larger, and these oversized rotors offer more leverage, meaning that you're going to have more braking power. Now that we mentioned the front rotors and the upgrades that you could do with them, let's talk about the rear rotors. In terms of the rear rotors, you're able to use the braking wave rotors. They offer a little less weight over the stock rotor, but also they have more thermal capacity since there is more rotor surface available. If you don't like the wave design, there is the traditional round design of the Ducts rear rotors. These rotors are a little thicker than the stock rotors in the back, which offer again added thermal capacity without the downside of being a heavier rotor. It's almost on par with your stock rear rotor. Now let's talk about the brake lines. The stock brake lines are stainless steel braided, which means they offer great performance. And when we're talking about performance with brake lines, we're talking about that crisp brake feel that you would want. If you still want better braking feel, you could upgrade to the Ultimate lines, which are the front Turbo Carbotech brake lines. They're only available for the Panigale V2 at this time. They're not available for the Streetfighter V2 variant. But with the Panigale V2, you could get the added benefit of that carbon fiber braided brake lines with running either the ABS setup, or if you want to delete your ABS, they're available in the ABS delete racing setup. These brake lines offer extremely crisp brake feel because there is almost little to none expansion that happens with the lines thanks to the proprietary carbon fiber braiding that they have. And when we did some testing, they're able to stand 16,900 psi of pressure before they burst. Since this is such an extreme number, even compared to the stainless steel brake lines, the most sensitive riders will see a great improvement on the already sharp brake feel that you would have with your stainless steel brake lines. Now that we have the lines out of the way, let's talk about our master cylinders, starting with our front master cylinders. In the front, if you want to upgrade your brake master cylinder, there's the RCS 17 and the Corsa Corta 17 master cylinders available. This is the recommended size by Brembo to match your stock calipers, the Stylema calipers, and the GP4 MS calipers that we spoke about. And the recommendations from Brembo comes due to the size of the pistons that's in your calipers. They match this to the size of the piston that's found in the RCS 17 and the Corsa Corta 17 master cylinder. The master cylinder upgrade provides you with more consistent and sharper brake feel under extreme conditions, but even over the stock master cylinders, these brake master cylinders offer greater reliability over your stock master cylinders, but also they're more consistent under extreme braking conditions. Before you pull the trigger and upgrade your front brake master cylinder, and it's time for me to note that if you're going to upgrade your brake master cylinder in the front, you're going to have to integrate your start-stop switch to make room so your brake lever does not interfere with your throttle casing. And this is pretty much standard procedure when you're upgrading your brake master cylinder on any Panigale or Streetfighter model, be it the V2 or the V4. But since we're focused on the V2 models, it also applies to these models. Luckily, WRS makes some really cool start-stop switches that integrates perfectly with your RCS and the RCS Corsa Corta master cylinders. Since we're in the subject of the front master cylinders, let's talk about your clutch master cylinder. Even though it's not part of the braking system, it's a good time to consider upgrading your clutch master cylinder. Number one, for the added benefits of an upgraded clutch master cylinder, which will make it a lot easier for you to pull in your clutch. It's going to be much softer and a linear pull, but also the looks of your master cylinders on your handlebar will match so that your front brake master cylinder matches your clutch master cylinder. But if you're upgrading your clutch master cylinder on a Panigale V2 or a Streetfighter model, please note that you must delete the clutch switch, meaning you either have to run a pressure banjo switch or not run a clutch switch at all. And if you don't run a clutch switch, the only downside is that your bike will not start in gear. You'll always have to find neutral before you start your bike. And usually that's what we prefer to do here over at Motomillion, because the banjo pressure switches are not the prettiest looking things on the motorcycles. Now that we discussed our front master cylinders, let's quickly talk about the rear master cylinder. There is options available on the market for your rear brake master cylinder. Nothing is a bolt-on for these applications. And if you're looking to upgrade your rear brake master cylinder, you're probably at a professional level. You have to decide what rear sets you're running and also what you want to achieve with that rear master cylinder. There are some great options by Brembo out. We're not going to go into the details of those because there's a lot of other components involved that you must switch before you upgrade your rear brake master cylinder. For most riders, be it even at a pro track day level, that rear brake master cylinder will do just fine. Now that we have the performance upgrades out of the way, let's talk about the brake and clutch reservoirs for these motorcycles. When you upgrade your brake and clutch master cylinders, you must change your brake reservoirs because the stock reservoirs mounts will not bolt up to these upgraded master cylinders. You could either get the OEM style Brembo reservoirs, or if you want to do a more of an aesthetic upgrade, you could look into the Rizoma reservoirs that we offer. All of the bike specific kits that we offer in terms of Rizoma reservoirs have the specific mounts included in them. But if you're running some crazy custom setup, you could always look into the TWM reservoir mounts, which are great because you could just bend them into the shape that you want to locate your reservoirs in the place that you want to locate them. In terms of the rear brake reservoir, you could either opt in for the colorful Rizoma reservoirs in the back, or you could use Motocorsa's beautiful integrated rear reservoir to clean things up. Now that we talked about the reservoirs, let's talk about what connects the reservoirs to your master cylinders, and we're talking about our Tygon tubing. The Tygon tubing is a great upgrade. Number one, visually it looks great because your brake fluid's in there and they're clear. And number two, you're able to see any bubbles that you have in the system. So when the time comes to bleed your brakes, they offer the ease of being able to see through your reservoir. They offer the ease of being able to see through your tubing, meaning that you're going to know that if there's any bubbles in the system or not. And I want to note that do not run this tubing on your rear reservoir because it's not made to withstand the heat that comes off your rear header pipes on these motorcycles. Next, let's talk about what goes in the tubing and also what goes into your braking system. And I'm talking about brake fluid. In terms of brake fluid, we always recommend the Brembo HTC 64T brake fluid because over the years, there's been many tests that's done. Yes, the brake boiling point pressure is very important, but one thing that nobody mentions is the compressibility factor. The Brembo HTC 64T is the least compressible brake fluid, which adds to the sharp brake feel that you want to achieve. Furthermore, the Brembo HTC 64T offers greater life on the bike, and this brake fluid also lasts much longer on the motorcycle before it degrades. Even if you put it through extreme heat cycles, we found out that HTC 64T fluid by Brembo lasts much longer than any other brand that we've ever used. I just want to note that if you live in a colder climate, this brake fluid might not work well in cold conditions, but if it's that cold, I don't think you should be riding your motorcycle. Now is the appropriate time to talk about the bleeder valves, and we love using the stall bus bleeder valves because of the ease of use and the added benefits that they have. On your front calipers, you could run the double banjo bolt on one side and the single banjo bolt bleeder on the other side. On the rear caliper, you could just run the stall bus bleeder valves just like you would on your front brake master cylinder and your clutch master cylinder. The added benefits of running this stall bus bleeder valves is the ease of use. Because of the design of these bleeder valves and the check valve that's inside of the bleeders, you're only going to have to use one person to bleed the brakes, and you could just crack that bleeder open and keep pumping. It won't let any air back into your system. Furthermore, the threads of the bleeders are sealed so that you know that once you crack that bleeder open, there's going to be no air going into the system through those open threads. And the stall bus bleeder valves offer optional colors for the caps, which allows you to add a little bit of style into your build. Now it's time to talk about the brake pads. And in terms of brake pads, I'm not going to give you any recommendations because first of all, you should figure out the type of riding you do and what you expect in terms of feel from a brake pad. And if you're at the level that you were specifically looking after a certain feel with your brake pads, I just recommend to do a little bit of research to see what pad compounds are out and available and what kind of braking feel that you could achieve from them. But don't forget, if you're doing extreme track duty, you might also want to look at the temperature ranges that these pads work. And since we're talking about brake pads, I also want to mention that the caliper upgrades that we offered all come with sintered brake pads from Brembo. These brake pads are great for any kind of road use, even spirited rides, and light track duty. And last but not the least are your brake cooling ducts that you might want to add to your motorcycle. They offer great performance benefits, but also they do lengthen the life of your caliper seals. The brake cooling ducts divert air onto your brake calipers, where most of the heat is stored in your braking system, aiding with cooling down of your system, but also they push away all the excess brake dust that's generated while you're braking, which means that you're going to be able to make those caliper seals last longer, because your caliper seal life really depends on the amount of brake dust that gets kicked onto your caliper pistons. And if you're running your stock size front rotors, you could use the universal full 6 carbon fiber brake cooling ducts. Or if you've upgraded to the oversized rotor setup, you could use the Panigale V4 specific brake cooling ducts by full 6. Now that we went through all of the components of your braking system and the upgrades that are available for your Panigale V2 or the Streetfighter V2, if you still have any questions left, you could either put them in the comments down below, or you could reach out to one of the Motomillion team members who will be more than happy to answer the questions that you might have. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. Until next time, guys, have a good one.